because liberty matters, because people's due process right matters. I don't care if they're from the left or the right. The bottom line is the reports of treatment they're coming out of that jail are reprehensible. They are not American.
These scientists may be complicit in one of the greatest crimes against humanity.
But I think it raises a lot of questions about whether the money is going to be funneled ultimately into the Chinese Communist Party and the Chinese military.
You got to pick a side. And General Milley picked one. And it wasn't the red, white, and blue.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Americans for Limited Government live stream. I appreciate you joining us today. We have a special guest, Kyle Reyes. He is the national spokesman for Law Enforcement Today. And Kyle and I actually go back a few years. This is the first time we've met, at least virtually. We've never actually met in person. But he and I worked together when I was at the National Rifle Association, and he worked with a lot of the Second Amendment advocates in Connecticut, which is your home state, Kyle. And you're also the president and CEO of a boutique marketing firm, Silent Partners Marketing. And you do a lot in the social media space. That's kind of your expertise, right?
Yeah, I mean, we live and breathe in the world of connecting people. And the reality of it is that the only companies that we do business with are super patriotic, bleed red, white, and blue individuals and companies.
So I appreciate you joining us today, because today you're going to be talking to us about in the role as spokesman for Law Enforcement Today. And before we get into what your new campaign is, tell people about your organization and what is Law Enforcement Today.
So Law Enforcement Today was founded a little over 10 years ago by a police captain in Florida, Captain Robert Greenberg. He wanted to be able to connect police officers and supporters across the country. He didn't anticipate that it would explode into the size of the organization that it is today. We have over 150 writers across all 50 states, and it is the largest police-owned media outlet in America.
In fact, why don't I just show people your website here? Let's see if I can pull that up. Let's see what happened. Give me 1 second. Okay, I'm putting it on. Let's see. Okay, there we go. Okay, so now we're both looking. This is the homepage of your website. Really, it's chock full of news stories, like you said, from all over the country, anything impacting our men and women in law enforcement. So like this is just your headlines today, New Jersey troopers, Minneapolis mayor. You really cover the gamut, everything impacting our law enforcement officers.
Yeah, I mean, even though the name of the organization is Law Enforcement Today, the majority of our readers aren't law enforcement. There are only 850,000 sworn law enforcement officers in America. And we strive to bring all topics pertaining to law and order in America. And as we've seen the spread of the defund the police movement, people are waking up and realizing that the same government that said, you don't need firearms because we'll protect you, is now turning around and saying, yeah, we're going to defund the very men and women who we promised we're going to protect you.
Yeah, I appreciate what you're doing. So you're not only sort of a news outlet and a news resource for people in the law enforcement community and their supporters, but you're also in the advocacy space, as evidenced by what we're going to talk about today. You are launching a campaign called Refund the Police. It's to counter the defund the police movement, which, as we know, has had disastrous consequences in this country over the last 18 months or so. So why don't you just tell me briefly about Refund the Police campaign, what it is, and how people can get involved?
Absolutely. So right off the rip, I'll tell everybody it's fundourpolice.com. And you put it best. There is this wave of a movement, the defund the police movement, that people in their minds, it actually makes sense to defund the police. It actually makes sense to take away resources and training from the very men and women who are keeping our communities safe. And it really all exploded in 2020, as we saw after the George Floyd riots. But this has been building in our country for a long time. This movement, this conversation about removing qualified immunity and police reform. And I don't even want to get into the semantics of it, because here's the only thing that matters. Is your family more or less safe today than they were before the defund the police movement spread? And statistically, the answer is no, not at all. And it's not just the big cities that defunded the police that we're seeing skyrocketing crime and murders and shootings and anarchy. We're seeing the small communities that didn't vote to defund the police that are now suffering as a result of the big cities that did, because that wave of crime is spreading into their communities as well. And so we've had so many people that have reached out that said, how do we help? How do we fight back? How do we get in the fight? What can we do about this? And so that's why we're launching this whole Refund the Police campaign.
What I'd like to do now, Kyle, is share just 1 minute of a 5-minute promo video that you produced, which is fabulous, explaining what this campaign is all about.
You've seen what the cancel culture has done. They've shut down cops, they've shut down Live PD. I mean, they've even gone after Paw Patrol. And so here's how we are fighting back. We've hired dozens of new writers at law enforcement today. Most of them are active, retired, or wounded police officers or their family members. Their sole job is to bring you the stories of what's really happening in America. And we're putting cinematographers on the road to capture the stories of police officers and patriotic Americans, the stories that the mainstream media often refuses to show you. Stop being the silent majority and be a part of the army that will help save America. You are not alone, but right now, our officers sure are. Backup has arrived, and this time, it's all of us. We will stand together, we will stand strong, and we will declare these are our officers, this is our country, this is our America. Today, we rise.
Lovely video. So the name of the website again, where people can go.
fundourpolice.com. And what we're doing is really a 3-tier approach. We have the strike team of reporters that's going after the defund the police movement, that's going to show the impact, that's going to show what it's done to the communities, that's going to show where the funding has come from behind the defund the police movement. And I'm not just talking at the national level. There are national organizations that are pushing to defund the police, but it's also happening at the local level, local cities and councils. So we're going after all of them. We're also going to be launching a media blitz, which is going to be a huge advertising campaign, show of support for law enforcement across the country. And third, at the local community level, I'm sure you've all heard of the Adopt a Highway program, but we're doing the same thing for small businesses with the Adopt a Police Department. So if you're a small business, you can't just call up your neighborhood police department and say, hey, we want to make a donation to you. But what you can do is you can make a donation to fundourpolice.com. Those funds will then be used. We'll contact that police department, let them know the community business that donated in their name, and those funds will then be used to tell the positive stories of what's happening in that police department and in that community.
Well, I love what you're doing. And if I could just share a personal story, my husband and I are both natives of New Mexico, Albuquerque, and Albuquerque was at the top of the list for one of the worst, murder rates in 2020. It's heartbreaking because I've spent so many years there to see the violent crime in my hometown just explode during this Black Lives Matter or defund police campaign. But we own some commercial property there, warehouses. And my husband pays about $600 a month to have private security, basically keep his properties safe from the homeless and other sort of problems. And I had the conversation with him the other day. I was looking at our payments. I said, why are we paying private security? Isn't that what the city government is supposed to be doing, is securing private property? I mean, shouldn't we already be paying for this with our tax dollars? And I think this sort of gets to what you all are saying, is that, yes, this is the role that our police department should be playing, but they are being defunded.
I would pose this thought to everybody. If we saw a massive increase in the number of people who are dying on operating tables or dying of heart attacks, would the solution be to say, we need to defund hospitals? We need to get rid of cardiothoracic surgeons? No, we're going to say, let's get to the bottom of what's going on and let's provide more funding for better training so that we can actually save lives. Let's not have a knee-jerk reaction based on feelings. Let's actually come up with viable solutions. And what we've seen happening more and more as government has expanded massively is that these knee-jerk reactions and solutions are built around nothing other than being woke and feelings. They're not built around actual community involvement, community policing, bringing stronger resources. And what the left tries to do is they try to make this a Democrats versus Republicans or a black versus white issue. And the reality of it is that it's not. A lot of the black communities, Minneapolis, New York, a lot of those boroughs, Chicago, Los Angeles, those communities are begging to expand the size of the police departments. Do they want reform in some way? Yeah, absolutely. But so does law enforcement. Law enforcement is constantly at the center of the conversation about the evolution of policing to do better and to have that accountability. Portland, Oregon, for example, the Portland Police Union has been begging for years for body cams for police officers in the same moments that the community is saying we want more accountability. Who's blocking it? The leadership.
Well, I think that what you're doing is very important, and you have millions of Americans who want to get involved and to help make a difference. Like you said, to no longer be the silent majority. And I think you may have touched on this earlier, but can you go into how the Adopt a Police Department program would work? I know you said it's similar to the Adopt a Highway program. That's a way for small businesses to help, right?
Absolutely. So those small businesses make a donation to the campaign in the name of the police department in their community. And then we contact that local police department and say, hey, such and such hardware store has made a donation in the name of Glastonbury Police Department to this campaign. We'd like for you to now send us your stories because they are funding media coverage of those stories. So we assign a reporter to cover the stories about that police department, and then that small business gets mentioned in all of those stories as well. And it reinforces the bonds between the community businesses and the police departments.
Wow. So I think I would rather, if my husband and I, not spend $600 on private security, but spend $600 to adopt a police department. To me, that makes a lot more sense.
I mean, listen, we have a huge morale issue in our country right now, too. And what a lot of people don't understand is the finances on the media side of how this works. So you might have a police department that has some amazing stories, but the media tends to not cover them because they aren't necessarily as popular. It's not the if it bleeds, it leads headlines, which means that those media outlets often won't cover their costs of producing that content and writing that story. And so these amazing stories that show the positive around law enforcement, they go unnoticed. Those stories go untold. We wanted to flip that. We wanted to create that relationship again between the community and the police departments, because all you see when you put on the news right now is the attacks on law enforcement, local, state, federal. We're seeing nothing but the negativity and the hate and the anger. We're seeing people who are afraid to have Thin line bumper stickers on their cars. And so we really believe that the overwhelming majority of Americans support law enforcement. We just want to make it okay to show that again. And we want cops to know that the community and Americans support them as well.
Right. I think that is so important. And you have also said that these refund the police movement is a direct response to the woke corporations who are pumping millions of dollars into the Black Lives Matter movement. I think that was very shocking to many of us. When the Black Lives Matter movement first emerged on the scene, it seemed pretty organic and authentic, like a response to a problem. But very quickly, it seemed like it was hijacked and co-opted by these woke corporations. And they dumped in, like you said, millions of dollars. And then we saw the stories of, them living the high life. The president of BLM was living in a private gated community off of all this corporate money that they were getting. And I don't think that that's what America is supporting. I think that a lot of what they have done has been very hurtful to our nation. As we can see from, you and I spoke the other day about the record crime statistics. Murders are up almost 30% across the country, not just in our large cities, but even in the smaller mid-sized cities. And this is a direct result of police departments defunding their police. And then in many cases, and you have talked about this because you work in that community, law enforcement are only responding to sort of major crimes, or they're not going to a lot of the crimes they might have gone to in the past. Because why should they, right? I mean, it's just been a disaster.
Well, and it's not just a staffing issue either. That is a huge component. I mean, so many of these police departments are chronically understaffed to begin with. They're below the mandates of what the city requires they have. Now you have a lot of cops taking early retirement. You have a tremendous amount of officers in some of the big cities that ended up out on leave, whether it be because they got physically assaulted or because Minneapolis is a great example. They're suffering from severe post-traumatic stress from being physically attacked, having bricks thrown at their heads. So you have that side of things. You also have a massive shortage in the number of new officers coming in because a lot of agencies canceled new recruit classes. And there's also the component that people are sitting here going, yeah, I don't want to be a cop right now. Who in the right mind would go into law enforcement? Now, on top of all of that, you have far left prosecutors like we see in Los Angeles, San Francisco, Philadelphia, across the country that are refusing to prosecute crime. And so we have more and more criminals being released from prison under the guise of COVID-19, at the same time that we have prosecutors refusing to prosecute, at the same time that you have cities like Philadelphia saying, we're not going to do minor traffic stops anymore. Well, it was a minor traffic stop that caught Timothy McVeigh, the bomber. And so we have this perfect storm of catastrophe. And I really believe most Americans are sitting here going, what is going on right now? The hypocrisy of seeing the mayor of San Francisco out partying with the co-founder of Black Lives Matter after having just passed a new mask mandate and nobody's wearing masks. People are waking up on enough of the rules for thee and not for me.
Yeah, you've nailed it. That's exactly right. Is there anything else that I haven't asked you about, or we should just really reiterate where people can go to get involved? If you want to say the name of the website again. Absolutely.
fundourpolice.com. I think one of the most important things is that we have sat here silently for the last year. We were doing a Back the Blue rally in Staten Island. I was speaking at it. Paul Butler, we had Ted Nugent coming out to perform the national anthem, Congressman Clay Higgins, and Cuomo dispatched the health department to the airport to meet them there when they landed, to say, you either need to quarantine for 14 days or get back on the plane and leave. You're not going to this event. And they did everything in their power to shut down the event. This was 2 weeks before they allowed celebrities from across the country to come in unchecked for the VMAs. And this was right at the same time that these massive rallies and riots were going on, which apparently those weren't super spreader events, but a couple of thousand people coming out to Back the Blue. That's a threat to society. So people are just so sick and tired of the hypocrisy, but it's time that we speak up. And it's time that we let police officers know that we have their back, because if nobody stands up and starts fighting for them, we are going to continue to see a mass exodus. The only people who are going to have that security and that support, it's going to be people who can afford private security. And this is all happening, let me remind you, at the same time that there's this massive push for continuing widespread gun control, which obviously we've seen how well that's worked out in cities like Chicago, right? And so we need people to step up and fight. We need people to be loud. I understand not everybody has funds to donate to fundourpolice.com. We understand and respect and appreciate that. So we do ask them to go on there and send in a prayer request, because we've got a group of prayer warriors out there as well who are filling those prayer requests and sending those thoughts and prayers forward to officers as well. So we just need people to get in the fight, because we are losing this cultural war right now, and it's costing lives.
All right, I just pulled up the website here, and if I can be techie enough, I can share that screen. Let's see. Here we go. 1 second, folks. Share screen. Yep, am I still sharing? Nope.
That's law enforcement today.
Okay, that's your law enforcement today.
Yep.
Let's see if I get rid of that. What happens? No. Anyway, so I'll just reiterate the name. It is fundthepolice.com.
Fundourpolice.com.
Oh, wait a minute. Then I got the wrong one. I found a Fund the Police. Fund Our Police. Okay, hang on. I'll get the right one.
I'm going to have to look that one up.
Okay, I got you. I got the right one. Stand by, folks. I may be able to share that screen. Share screen. Go into my Chrome tab. Law enforcement. Oh, I see. All right, guys, I think I did it.
There
we
it
go.
is.
Okay, so this is what the screen will look like when you get to it. And to emphasize, it is fundourpolice.com. When you get there, you're going to see this. Oh, and look right there on their homepage is the awesome video they produced, which I showed you a little bit of earlier. So this gives you all the tools, resources on how you can help to show your support for law enforcement. And again, this is an attempt to push back on the defund the police movement, which has really been devastating to our country, our communities. So thank you, Kyle, for everything that you are doing. And I'll give you the last word.
I want to leave everybody with a thought. I was up in Portland, Oregon a couple of months ago, and I asked one of the officers there, is it really as bad as we've been reporting? And he said, no, it's so much worse. I said, well, tell me a little bit about it. He said he was on the front line of a riot. They have more than 100 straight days of riots. And he was 10 plus hours into a shift, and a guy walked up to him nose to nose and started laughing. And he said, what's so funny? And he held up a picture of that officer's wife and kids and said, one day when you're at work, we're going to rape and murder your family. That's what we're up against. Don't tell me the war on law enforcement isn't a real thing. Don't tell me this isn't impacting lives and crushing souls and coming for our families next. We have to step up and fight. fundourpolice.com. Love you all, and thanks for having me.
All right. Well, thank you very much. We appreciate it, Kyle. And we'll be back in touch with you another time to see how things are going. And thanks, everyone, for joining Americans for Limited Government live stream.